Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilma. Rabbi ishrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Amma ba'd. So this will be a brief explanation of the book Furu' al-Fiqh by Al-Imam Jamaluddin Yusuf ibn Abdul Hadi al-Maqdisi al-Hanbali rahimahullah ta'ala. And this book is taken from another book of his known as Zubadul Ilm, in which he speaks about various sciences. And from that, there is a section relating to fiqh, which was then taken and published as a separate book, which is this book, Furu' al-Fiqh. So the Shaykh said, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Kitabu Furu' al-Fiqh. مدار الفقه على عشرة أشياء. Fiqh revolves around 10 sections, 10 things. Now, the Hanbali madhab usually divides fiqh into 4 sections. The first being al-ibadat, actions of worship. The second being al-mu'amalat, transactions, business, and things which relate to that. The third being fiqh al-usra, family law, relating to nikah, marriage, talaq, dhihar, and all of those similar rulings. And the fourth section being jinayat, criminal law, felonies, qisas. Also they mention it in this section, the rulings relating to al-iqrar wa shahada and al-qada, giving judgments and testimonies, and things relating to fiqhul jinayat, which is criminal law. But here the Shaykh has divided it into 10 sections. So he put 1 ibadah. That is the same as the first section of Hanbali fiqh. The first quarter being rulings relating to actions of worship. The second being mu'amalat. And the third being, here he put ijtima', and then the fourth he put firaq. Ijtima' referring to rulings relating to marriage, nikah, and things which follow that, such as sadaq and shuhud and all of those relevant topics. And the fourth here he put firaq, rulings relating to separation, divorce, and those which are similar to it. So these two are the equivalent of the third section of Hanbali fiqh relating to fiqh al-usra, family law. Then the remaining are all part of the fourth section of Hanbali fiqh, which is fiqh al-jinayat. So here he put wajinayat as the fifth section, meaning felonies, crimes. Then the sixth he put ma'asi, sins, which is sort of the same as the previous, but there are differences which we will come to inshallah. And the seventh he put wastikhraju dhalik, yani taking the rights of people, giving it back to them, which relates to al-qada, judgment, and hukum in courts and things relevant to that. Then 8th and 9th he put wa akl wa shurb, rulings relating to that which is eaten and drank. This is usually called kitabul at'imah in Hanbali fiqh, the rulings relating to foods. And this usually comes at the end of the section of jinayat. And the 5th he put qismul mawarith, inheritance, and rulings relating to that, which is usually found in Hanbali fiqh in the second section, fiqh al-mu'amalat, at the end of it. So starting with the first, he said al-awalu fil ibadat wa hiya khamsatun. The first section being the rulings of acts of worship, they are 5. As-salah, the first one being prayer, as-salah. The second being az-zakah. The third being as-sawm, fasting. The fourth being hajj, al-hajj. And the fifth being al-jihad. And under this there will be other sections which will come, such as al-tahara and other than that. So the first one, as-salah, he said al-awalu minha as-salah. The first section from the section of actions of worship, ibadat, is that topic of as-salah, prayer. وَتَشْتَمِلُ أُمُورُهَا عَلَى سَبْعَةِ أَشْيَاء. And this will contain within it 7 aspects. 1. Shart. 2. Warukn. 3. Wawajib. 4. Wasunnah. 5th. Wamubah. 6th. Wamakruh. And 7th. Wamuharram. So the 7 aspects which will be spoken about first is shart, conditions. The second being warukn, pillars. The third being wawajib, obligations. What's the difference between these? Firstly, a shart is something which is outside of the act of worship, but it is necessary for it to be present before the action. So a shart is ما يلزم من عدمه العدم. If the shart is not present, if the condition is not present, then that action, it cannot be present, as in it cannot be valid. So the shart is something which comes before the action. As for a rukn wal wajib, those are parts within the action itself. And the difference between them, between a rukn, a pillar, and a wajib, is that a rukn is something which is fundamental, which if it is left, then even if it's left due to forgetfulness, then this will invalidate the salah or invalidate a part of it, such as a rak'ah, as we will come to. And as for a wajib, an obligation, then the difference is that a wajib, if it is left due to forgetfulness, then it does not invalidate the salah, but if it is left on purpose, then it does invalidate the salah. And also a rukn is sometimes referred to in Hanbali books as al-fard. So here they differentiate between a rukn and al-wajib, as well as al-fard and al-wajib, with fard meaning rukn. That is something which is necessary in the action of worship, and if it is not present, then the action can become invalid, whether it's left on purpose or other than that. And as for a wajib, then that is something which invalidates the prayer or the action of worship if it is left on purpose, not if it is left by accident. So those were the first 3: shart, condition; second being rukn, pillar; and third being wajib, obligation. The fourth thing is as-sunnah, recommendations, things which a person is rewarded for doing, but he is not sinful for leaving off. The fifth, wamubah, things which are permissible, as in doing it there is no reward for it, and leaving it off there is no sin. The sixth being makruh, something which is disliked, which there is reward for leaving it, but there is no sin if you do it, and you are commanded to leave it, but it is not a strict command, a strict prohibition, in the sense that if you do it, there is no sin upon you. And the seventh being muharram, which is a strict prohibition. If a person does it, then the person will be sinful. Now, coming to the first part, which was a shart, condition. Al-awalu ash-shurut wa hiya sitta. Conditions are 6. The conditions for salah are 6. The first one which he will mention is Al-awalu minha at-taharatu min al-hadath. The first condition from it is at-tahara, purification from al-hadath. We will come to what that means, inshallah. Generally speaking, in books of fiqh, tahara is put as a separate section before kitab al-salah, even though tahara, its purification, is a condition for salah, but usually it is mentioned separately due to it being quite a long topic. But here, Shaykh Jamaluddin Yusuf ibn Abdullah Hadi rahimahullah has put it as the first part of Kitab al-Tahara, due to it being the first condition for it. He has put as the first part of Kitab al-Salah, And Tahara is 2 types. Tahara from hadath and Tahara from al-najas. So, al-hadath, it is something which is wasfun qa'imun bil badan yamna'u min as-salati wa nahwihi. It is a thing, a state which a person's body is in, which prohibits them or prevents them from prayer, and things which are similar to that, such as touching the mushaf and other than that. So that is what al-hadath is. So tahara is raf'u al-hadath wa ma fi ma'nahu, removing this state, this hadath. That is the first part of tahara. And the second part is zawalul khabath, removing impurities, which will come second as the second condition mentioned by Shaykh Ibn al-Mibrad. So the first he said, al-awwalu minha at-taharatu min al-hadath wa la budda fihi min thalathati umur. So this first condition, which is purification from al-hadath, removing the state which purification from the state which prevents the person from salah. There are three aspects to it. The first is al-mutatahhir, the person who is doing the purification. What are the rulings relating to that? They will come now in detail, inshallah. And the second being wal-mutatahharu bihi, the thing by which the purification is done, which is water or at-turab, soil, as which will come for tayammum. And the third is at-tahara, the purification itself. So we have three parts, you could say three arkan, three pillars of tahara. The first is al-mutatahhir, the one who is doing the purification. Wal-mutatahhar bihi, the one which is the thing by which the purification is done. And the third is at-tahara, the action of purification itself. Then he mentioned wanaqid, the thing which nullifies purification, as a fourth thing, as a fourth aspect to complete the section. So the first he said, وَأَمَّا الْمُتَطَهِّرُ فَهُوَ, the one who does the purification. Who is able to do purification? Who is purification accepted from? Al-awwal al-mukallaf. So the Shaykh here, he said that purification is done by a person who is mukallaf, a person who is obligated in the Sharia, in the religion, who the rulings of the Sharia apply to. And al-mukallaf in the Sharia, it is a person who has two descriptions, two sifat, that they are baligh and aqil. They have reached puberty and they have intellect, al-aql. Now here the Shaykh said that al-mutatahhir, the one who does the purification, they must be mukallaf. They must be in a state where they are both baligh, have reached puberty, and they are aqil, they have intellect. But here there is a bit of tafsil, detail, which is necessary to mention. Regarding the ahkam of the Sharia, the rulings, there are conditions, shurut, which are shurut al-wujub, conditions for the obligation of an action. And there are also shurut al-siha, conditions for the acceptance or the validity of an action. And then there are some shurut which are shurut al-wujub wa-siha, conditions which are for both the obligation and the validity. So a person being mukallaf, meaning they are baligh and aqil, this, a part of it applies to shurut al-wujub and a part applies to shurut al-siha, conditions for obligation and conditions for validity. As for being an aqil, a person who has intellect, then this is a condition for both the obligation and the validity. Meaning a person who is not aqil, who does not have intellect, such as a person who has mental disabilities or other than that, then they are not obligated with such rulings, tahara, purification and salah and other than that, nor is it accepted from them. Meaning even if they were to do tahara, purification or salah or other than that, then this action of worship would not be valid from them. Why? Because, as we will come to, one of the conditions for these actions is an-niyyah, intention. And intention, an-niyyah, is something which cannot be done by a person who lacks intellect. And the second part of it being al-bulugh, reaching puberty, then this is only a condition for al-wujub, for the obligation. Meaning a person who has reached bulugh, they are the ones who are obliged to do tahara, purification, so that they can pray salah, because salah is obligatory upon them. As for a person who has not reached puberty, then if they are mumayyiz, meaning they have reached an age where they are able to think rationally, which is at the age of 7 according to the Hanbali madhab, then from there their actions of worship are valid, meaning that at-tamyiz, reaching the age at which a child is able to think for themselves and differentiate between different things, which is at the age of 7, this is the condition for the validity. So a child which is younger than that age, if they pray salah, then it would not be accepted from them, and the salah would not be valid because they do not have tamyiz. But if they have reached the age of 7 or more than that, then from here the action is valid from them. Their ibadah is sahihah, but they are not obligated to do so, because the obligation only comes when they reach the age of puberty, when one of the signs of puberty is present, which we'll come to inshallah. So that was the first aspect of al-mutatahhir, the person who does the purification. They must be mukallaf, meaning they must have aql, intellect, and they must have reached the age of tamyiz for it to be valid, and they must have reached puberty for it to be obligatory upon them. The second aspect of al-mutatahhir, the person doing purification, it is that they must be al-khali min mani'in hissiyin aw shar'iyyin, that the person must be free from a preventative mani'. What is a mani'? ما يلزم من وجوده العدم. It is something which, if it is present, then it nullifies that action, that act of worship, or it prevents that act of worship from being done or from being valid. So that mani', both the person must be free from mawani', preventatives, which are hissi, which are physical, such as al-hayd wal-nifas, meaning a woman having al-hayd, which is menstruation, or al-nifas, which is bleeding after giving birth. Then these are mawani', preventatives, hissiyya, physical preventatives. So a woman who has hayd or nifas, then their salah is not accepted and it is not valid, and they are not obligated to pray it. So for salah, al-hayd wa nifas, these two are mani'an, they are preventatives, man' al-wujub wa man' al-sihah, they prevent both the obligation and the validity. Then he said, aw shar'i, so the person must be al-khali an mani'in shar'iyyin aw hissi, that they must be free from preventatives which are both physical, which we mentioned is al-hayd wa nifas for women, and they must be free from preventatives which are shar'i, religious preventatives, which is al-kufr, disbelief. Since a person being a kafir, a disbeliever, then this is a preventative from the validity of that action of worship. Meaning a kafir who prays salah or gives zakah or fasts sawm or does hajj or any of these actions of worship, then those actions of worship are invalid because they are not Muslims, and the condition for its validity is that the person must be a Muslim. Now, the majority of the fuqaha, they mention this as a condition, not a preventative. So they mention al-Islam as a condition for actions of worship, as a condition of wujub and as of sihha. But here the Shaykh mentioned it as a preventative. And as for Islam being a condition for as-sihha, for it being a condition for the validity of the action of worship, then this is clear, meaning a kafir, if they do an action of worship, it's not accepted from them. As for it being a condition for al-wujub, for the obligation, then this relates to the rulings, the ahkam of the dunya, meaning that a kafir لا يلزم بالصلاة أو الزكاة أو الصوم في الدنيا. They are not obligated, they are not forced to or commanded to do these actions in the dunya, meaning they're not told to pray or to fast or to give zakah or any of these things, because even if they were to do it, it would not be valid from them. But as for the akhirah, are they held accountable for leaving off these actions of worship? According to the Hanabila and the Jumhur of the ulama, yes, they are held accountable for leaving off these obligations in the akhirah, meaning al-kuffaru mukhatabuna bi furu' al-shari'ah. This is a mas'ala which is mentioned in books of Usul al-Fiqh. The kuffar, they are commanded to come with the furu', the subsidiary masail, issues of the religion. And if they do not come with them, then they are sinful. And they will be held accountable for that. But if they do come with it before accepting Islam, then it would not be valid from them in the dunya nor in the akhirah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept actions of worship from a disbeliever. So those were the conditions relating to al-mutatahhir, the person doing the action of purification. As for amma al-mutatahharu bihi, the thing which the person does purification with, then these are two things. Al-awwal, fal-ma'u at-tahur, water which is tahur, pure water. Now, water is the thing by which purification is done. And water, according to the Hanbali madhab, is of three categories. Al-ma' al-tahur is the first one. The second being al-ma' al-tahir. And the third being al-ma' al-najis. Purifying water, al-ma' al-tahur. And the second being pure water, al-ma' al-tahir. And the third being impure water, al-ma' al-najis. The difference between the three is, first, al-ma' al-tahur, purifying water. It is al-tahir binafsihi, al-mutahhir li-ghayrihi, water which is pure within itself and it purifies, meaning it can be used for purification. This is the first type, and that is al-ma' al-baqi ala khilqatihi, water in its original state. This is al-ma' al-tahur, purifying water. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً طَهُورًا. And the second type of water is al-ma' al-tahir, water which is pure within itself, but it is not mutahhir, meaning it cannot be used for purification, meaning it does not remove al-hadath, which you mentioned before, nor does it remove al-najis, najasa, impurities. If you use al-ma' al-tahir according to the madhab, then the ruling of that najasa has not been lifted. Rather, that impurity is still present, because this water which was used was not tahur, it was not purifying water, rather it was only pure water, tahir. But being pure is not sufficient, rather the water must also be purifying, mutahhir, meaning it must be ma tahur. And the third category of water is al-ma' al-najis, impure water. Now, here the condition is that the water used for lifting impurities and for lifting al-hadath, then this must be water which is tahur, purifying water. Then secondly he said أو التراب عند عدمه أو ضرر في استعماله. The first thing used for purification is water, and this is the asl. This is the essential or the foundational ruling. And if there is no water, or there is harm in using the water, then the ruling is that the person can do tayammum, and so they would use at-turab. Turab meaning soil. When can they use turab? When is turab a valid thing to do tahara with? It is when there is either no water, يعني عند عدمه يعني عدم الماء, when there is no water, either that the person has no water at all حقيقة, or they have no water حكما, يعني it is as if they have no water. The ruling is as if they have no water, such as if there is water but they're not able to reach it, such as water in a well without having any equipment to take that water out of the well. The water is present but they are not able to take it or use it, so here it is as if the water was not present. Likewise, for example, if the water which he has is not tahur, it's not purifying water, rather it's water which is only tahir, then in this case also it's not valid, and it's as if that water is not present. أو ضرر في استعماله, or if the water is present but there is harm in using it, such as the water being a small amount which they need for drinking. For example, if they are traveling in the desert or something like that, and they have a small amount of water, and this water is required for the person to drink, and so if they do wudhū with it, then they won't have anything to drink. So here the water is present, but due to al-darar fi istimalihi, due to the harm in using it, then they are allowed to do tayammum. Likewise, if they use it, for example, if they have a wound on their body and they can't use the water due to it causing them to have illnesses or infections or something like that, then in such a case also the person is allowed to do tayammum. Now, of course, all of these rulings have a lot more detail, but since this book is very mukhtasar, summarized and short, then these rulings will be discussed in later books such as Bidayat al-Abid, Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat, Zad al-Mustaqni', and other than that. Now, we spoke about the rulings relating to the first being al-mutatahhir, the person who is doing the purification, the tahara. Secondly, we talked about al-mutatahharu bihi, the thing by which the purification is done, which is the water or the soil when water cannot be used. And in the madhab, tayammum can only be done with soil, turab, so it cannot be done with sand or dust or any other sort of thing from the earth. Rather, it must be soil, turab. Now, and also the turab must be tahur, pure, purifying. So if it is najis, impure soil, such as if najas, impurity, has fallen in it or touched it, or if it is tahir, meaning it's pure but it's not purifying, such as if it's musta'mal, used, and things like that. All of those details will be discussed in other books, but in such cases also the turab cannot be used. Rather, the turab, the soil, must be purifying, tahur. Then the Shaykh said, وَأَمَّا الطَّهَارَةُ فَهِيَ, as for the purification itself, the action, it is صغرى وهي الوضوء ويحتوي على سنة وهو التسمية وغسل الكفين قبله ثلاثة إلى آخره. So he's going to mention now that the tahara, purification, is two types. يعني الطهارة عن الحدث, purification from الطهارة من الحدث, purification from الحدث, removing this state of hadith, it is two types, because al-hadith is two types. Al-hadith al-akbar and al-hadith al-asghar. The first being al-hadith al-akbar, which is the major state of impurity of al-hadith, which is the one which obligates al-ghusl, a full body shower. And the second is the minor state of al-hadith, which is the one which obligates al-wudhū only. So as for al-tahara al-sughra, the smaller tahara purification, yani the one for minor hadith, then it is وَهِيَ الْوُضُوء, it is wudu, وَيَحْتَوِي عَلَى, and it contains sunnah, وَهُوَ التَّسْمِيَةِ. So here he's going to talk about the rulings relating to al-wudu, which is what's obligatory, what's a fard, meaning a rukn, a pillar, what is a wajib, obligation, and what is a sunnah, recommendation, and rulings other than that. And the details of that will be taken in another class, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.